Can anyone tell me what it truly means to know oneself? The old philosopher's voice echoed through the small, sunlit classroom, his eyes scanning the faces of his students. A few shifted nervously in their seats, while others glanced around, waiting for someone to answer. The philosopher, known for his thought-provoking questions, leaned against his wooden desk with a thoughtful smile. His students knew that when he asked a question, it was never simple, and the answer was never straightforward. Is knowing oneself just about understanding your likes and dislikes? He continued, his voice softer but no less commanding. Is it about understanding your past, your memories, or the emotions you feel every day? Or is there something deeper? Something more fundamental that lies beneath the surface? A young student named Maya, sitting at the front of the class, hesitantly raised her hand. I think knowing oneself is about understanding your true nature, she offered, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not sure what that really means. The philosopher nodded approvingly. Ah, your true nature. A profound answer, Maya. But here's another question for you all. Is this true nature something permanent and unchanging, or is it, perhaps, an illusion, a construct of our minds? The students exchanged puzzled glances. This wasn't going to be a simple lecture on philosophy. They could feel it. Today's lesson was going to challenge their very perception of self and reality. Let me tell you a story, the philosopher began, drawing the students' attention even closer. There were two great teachers, Carl Jung and Gautama Buddha, who both sought to answer these very questions, but in seemingly opposite ways. One spoke of the self, an evolving principle of growth and unity. The other taught of non-self, an illusion to be seen through and let go. Yet, both aimed at the same ultimate understanding. How could this be? Can such contradictory teachings both hold truth? Let's explore this together, and perhaps, you will find answers not just from me, but from within yourselves. With that, the philosopher turned towards the chalkboard and wrote two words, self and non-self. The students leaned forward, intrigued, ready to delve into the depths of these ancient teachings and uncover what they might reveal about the true nature of their own existence. Buddha and Carl Jung, contrasting and comparing teachings, Carl Jung and Gautama Buddha, what a fascinating duo to explore together. These two monumental figures have shaped our understanding of the human psyche and spirit in profound ways. Yet, at first glance, their teachings appear to stand in stark opposition to one another. Jung's emphasis on the development of a robust self contrasts sharply with the Buddha's advocacy for the realization of non-self or anatta. So, why are their teachings so different, and could there be hidden similarities that bridge this apparent divide? Prepare to embark on a deep and thought-provoking journey as we explore these questions and more. Before we dive in, let's take a moment to appreciate the depth and significance of what we are about to explore. Comparing the teachings of Carl Jung and Gautama Buddha is no small feat. These thinkers come from vastly different historical contexts, cultural backgrounds, and philosophical traditions. Yet, both have left indelible marks on our understanding of the self and the path to personal and spiritual growth. Are you ready to uncover the mysteries that lie at the intersection of these two worlds? Let's go. Central concepts, self versus non-self. Jung's concept of the self. In Jungian psychology, the self is not just a simple concept, it's a profound archetype that serves as the cornerstone of his entire psychological framework. Imagine this, a guiding principle that embodies both the process and the goal of psychic growth. For Jung, the self represents the totality of the psyche, integrating both conscious and unconscious elements. It's not merely about becoming who you are, it's about becoming whole. Sounds intriguing, right? The self, according to Jung, is like the conductor of a vast orchestra, harmonizing the many parts of the psyche into a coherent and unified whole. It includes everything from our conscious identity to our shadow, the anima and animus, and even the most hidden, unconscious elements. This process of integration, what Jung called individuation, is what allows us to become our most authentic selves. But here's the kicker, the self isn't something static. It's a dynamic, evolving process that unfolds throughout one's life. Doesn't this sound like an exciting journey to undertake? Buddha's concept of non-self. Now, let's pivot to Buddha's teachings on non-self, Anatta. At first, it might seem like Buddha's views are the polar opposite of Jung's. The Buddha taught that the idea of a permanent, unchanging self is nothing but an illusion, a mirage that keeps us trapped in a cycle of suffering. What a radical notion! He asserted that what we commonly call the self is just a collection of ever-changing mental and physical phenomena. No permanent essence, no enduring identity. Just a flow of experiences. Can you imagine what it means to truly see the self as an illusion? To recognize that the I we cling to is nothing more than a mental construct? The Buddha argued that by letting go of this illusory self, we can liberate ourselves from suffering and achieve nirvana, a state of ultimate freedom and peace. It's a revolutionary path that asks us to completely rethink our understanding of existence and identity. Yet, both of these perspectives, Jung's concept of the self and Buddha's idea of non-self, provide profound insights into the nature of our experience. But wait! Are they really as contradictory as they seem? Or could there be more common ground than we first thought? Let's dig deeper. Understanding Jung's self. To truly grasp the difference between Jung's self and Buddha's non-self, we need to clarify what each term means. In Jungian psychology, the concept of the self is layered and multifaceted. Jung's everyday use of self. When we talk about the self in everyday language, what do we really mean? For Jung, this common usage mostly refers to the ego, the center of our conscious awareness and identity. O ego. Jung described the ego as a complex of ideas that forms the core of our consciousness. Think of it as your personal narrative, the you that wakes up in the morning, remembers the past, and anticipates the future. The ego helps you navigate the external world and gives you a sense of continuity and identity. But, beware. If the ego becomes too rigid, it can lead to egocentrism, where you start to see yourself as the center of everything. Haven't we all met someone like that? Ego's function. Despite its potential pitfalls, the ego serves an essential role in maintaining our sense of self over time. It's flexible enough to adapt to new experiences while keeping a consistent thread of identity. However, it's just a small part of a much larger picture, the psyche as a whole, Jung's technical use of self. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. For Jung, the self is much more than just the ego. It's a comprehensive concept that encompasses the entire psyche, both conscious and unconscious. Complexes. Have you ever reacted to something without really knowing why? That's a complex at work. Jung was fascinated by these unconscious focal points of psychic energy that can influence our behavior and thoughts without our conscious awareness. Complexes can act like reflexes, shaping our reactions and decisions in ways that often surprise us. The goal of Jungian therapy is to bring these hidden parts of ourselves into the light of consciousness, integrating them into our overall sense of self. Ego as a complex. Here's a thought-provoking idea. Jung considered the ego itself to be a complex. Yes, the very I we identify with so closely is just one of many complexes in the psyche. It's not the whole story, not by a long shot. The self, in Jungian terms, represents the totality of the psyche, integrating all these different aspects into a harmonious whole. The self in Jungian psychology. In Jungian psychology, the self is the ultimate goal of individuation, the process of becoming a complete, whole person. It's about bringing together all the disparate parts of the psyche, both light and shadow, into a unified whole. This isn't just some abstract concept, it's something you can experience in dreams, emotions, and moments of profound insight. Doesn't the idea of becoming more whole, more integrated, resonate with a deep, almost instinctual longing within us all? Understanding Buddha's non-self. Now, let's turn back to the Buddha's revolutionary teaching on non-self. The Buddha's insights are not just philosophical musings, they are radical, transformative ideas that challenge us to see the world in a completely new way. Buddha's teaching on non-self. At the heart of the Buddha's teaching is the idea that the self is an illusion. Imagine realizing that what you have always thought of as you is not a fixed entity, but a constantly changing flow of experiences. The Buddha taught that clinging to the notion of a permanent self is the root cause of suffering. This is because the self, as we understand it, is nothing more than a collection of the five aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are all in a constant state of flux, and to cling to them as if they were permanent is to invite suffering, ego and clinging. So, what about the ego? The Buddha did not deny the existence of the ego; it's a necessary part of our experience. But he taught that the ego is an illusion. The sense of I is not something that exists independently, it's a mental construct that arises from the interplay of various factors. The real problem, the Buddha said, is our attachment to this illusory self. By clinging to it as if it were real, we create suffering for ourselves and others. Clinging and suffering. The Buddha's teaching is clear: suffering arises from clinging. We cling to the idea of a permanent self, to sensory pleasures, to beliefs, and to the desire for existence. This clinging is driven by ignorance of the true nature of reality. But here's the good news: by seeing through this illusion, we can let go of attachment and find freedom from suffering. Imagine the relief and liberation that comes with realizing that you don't have to hold on so tightly to your sense of self, the illusory nature of the self. According to the Buddha, the self is like a mirage, a phantom created by our minds in their quest for permanence in an impermanent world. When we understand this, we can start to loosen our grip on the ego and open ourselves up to a deeper, more expansive understanding of who we are. Jung might agree with the Buddha that the ego is an illusion, but he also saw it as a necessary step in the journey toward a greater sense of self, one that integrates all aspects of the psyche, including the unconscious. Comparing self and non-self, are you starting to see the connections? Despite their apparent differences, there are fascinating parallels between Jung's concept of the self and the Buddha's teaching on non-self. Both offer profound insights into the nature of human experience and the path to personal growth and liberation. Different perspectives on the self. From the Buddha's perspective, the self is an illusion, a clinging construct that causes suffering. The sense of I is just a mental fabrication, a story we tell ourselves that has no real substance. The goal is to see through this illusion and let go of attachment, thereby attaining liberation. In contrast, Jung's concept of the self is not an illusion but an evolving principle of growth. For Jung, the self represents the totality of the psyche, including both conscious and unconscious elements. It's not something to be clung to, but a dynamic process to be engaged in. The self is a symbol of the journey toward individuation, a path of psychological integration and wholeness. Integration versus dissolution. While the Buddha's teachings focus on dissolving the ego's illusion, Jung's psychology emphasizes integration and wholeness. For Jung, the goal of psychological development is not to dissolve the ego but to integrate it with the unconscious aspects of the psyche, leading to a more comprehensive and unified sense of self. This process of integration is what allows us to become our fullest selves, embracing all aspects of who we are. It's not about letting go of the ego, but about bringing it into harmony with the rest of the psyche. Can you see how these two perspectives might complement each other? The Buddha's teachings offer a path to liberation from the illusion of self, while Jung's psychology provides a roadmap for integrating the many parts of the psyche into a harmonious whole. Both approaches offer valuable insights into the nature of the self and the path to personal growth and liberation. Conclusion: integrating both perspectives. So, where does this leave us? While Buddhism and Jungian psychology offer different models of the self, they also provide complementary insights into the nature of human experience. The Buddha's teaching on non-self reveals the impermanence and illusory nature of the ego and its clinging tendencies. By recognizing the truth of non-self, we can let go of attachment and achieve a state of liberation from suffering. On the other hand, Jung's concept of the self provides a framework for understanding the dynamic process of psychic growth and integration. The self in Jungian psychology is not an illusion but a symbol of the totality of the psyche, encompassing both conscious and unconscious elements. It represents the goal of individuation, the journey toward psychological wholeness and integration. These perspectives need not be mutually exclusive. In fact, by engaging with both, we can deepen our understanding of ourselves and the nature of our experience. The Buddha's teachings offer valuable insights into the nature of impermanence and the path to liberation, while Jung's psychology provides a framework for understanding the process of individuation and the integration of the psyche. While Buddhism and Jungian psychology offer different models of the self, they also provide complementary insights. The Buddha's teachings focus on the dissolution of the ego's illusion, while Jung's psychology emphasizes integration and wholeness. Both approaches offer valuable wisdom for navigating the complexities of human experience. By understanding both perspectives, we can gain a more nuanced and holistic view of the self and the path to personal growth and liberation. Whether we are seeking spiritual enlightenment or psychological integration, the teachings of the Buddha and Carl Jung offer profound insights into the nature of the self and the journey toward wholeness. So, what do you think? Is it possible to integrate these two seemingly opposing views into a more comprehensive understanding of the self? Could it be that by embracing both the wisdom of the Buddha and the insights of Jung, we can achieve a deeper, more balanced perspective on the nature of human experience? The journey toward self-understanding is never straightforward, but perhaps it's in the tension between these two great teachings that we find the richest ground for growth. What a fascinating journey this is! Are you ready to explore it further? As the lesson drew to a close, the philosopher paused and looked around the room. The once curious and puzzled expressions on his students' faces had deepened into thoughtful contemplation. The discussion about Carl Jung's concept of the self and the Buddha's teaching on non-self had sparked a lively debate, leaving each student wrestling with their understanding of identity and existence. So, the philosopher said, breaking the silence, now that we have explored both Jung's idea of the self and the Buddha's concept of non-self, where do you find yourself? Are these teachings truly as opposed as they seem, or is there a bridge that connects them? A student named Arjun, who had been quiet for most of the discussion, finally spoke up. Master, I think both Jung and Buddha are pointing to the same truth, but from different directions. Jung's self is about integrating all parts of who we are, while Buddha's non-self teaches us to let go of the attachment to the illusion of a permanent identity. Maybe understanding our true nature involves both, embracing all aspects of ourselves while also realizing that these aspects are not fixed. The philosopher's eyes twinkled with approval. Excellent, Arjun. You've touched upon a profound insight. To integrate the self is to recognize every part of our being, both light and shadow, conscious and unconscious. But to see through the illusion of self is to understand that all these parts are constantly changing and interconnected with everything around us. One does not negate the other, rather, they enrich our journey towards understanding and growth. Another student, Lena, raised her hand with a thoughtful look. Master, does that mean the journey to know oneself is both an inward and outward path? To look within but also to see beyond our inner constructs? Indeed, Lena, the philosopher responded, his voice filled with a mix of pride and excitement. The journey to self-knowledge is both inward and outward. It is a journey of introspection and integration, but also of release and liberation. It is about becoming whole by acknowledging all that we are, and also about finding freedom by seeing through the illusions that bind us. The self and the non-self are not enemies but companions on this path. The students nodded, some smiling as the pieces began to fit together in their minds. The philosopher could see the light of understanding dawning on their faces, each of them making their own connections, finding their own balance between these two seemingly opposing truths. Remember, the philosopher concluded, the teachings of Jung and Buddha are tools, maps to guide you. But the real journey, the true discovery, lies within each of you. You must explore these teachings, challenge them, and see where they lead you. There is no single right answer, only the one that resonates with your own experience and wisdom. With those final words, the philosopher stepped away from the chalkboard and closed his notebook. He watched as his students gathered their things, their minds still buzzing with the day's discussion. They had come a long way today, not just in understanding philosophy but in exploring the depths of their own beings. As the students left the classroom, the philosopher stayed behind for a moment, gazing out the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. He knew that each of his students was embarking on a journey that would continue far beyond the walls of this classroom, a journey of self-discovery, reflection, and growth, and with a contented smile, he whispered to himself, "May they find the path that leads them to their own truth."